All right, everyone, we start off today talking about the infrastructure bill. First, Biden's persistent it won't cost anything, it will cost $0 lie, because, I took math. I took it at the college prep level. I always got good grades in math. I was led to believe by my math teachers that 0 and $3.5 trillion weren't the same thing. Apparently, in Bidenomics La La Land, they're identical, which could show the fact that that is believed in by part of the population, including apparently by members of Congress. I think we've nailed down the reason why the economy sucks right now, because these people are clearly not playing with a full deck. We're also going to talk about the convolution of why the infrastructure bill at the moment is dead in the water, may fail entirely, may get stopped from passing in any form in the future, except the part where they can use budget reconciliation, and even that may be a hard sell, because Nancy Pelosi will shelve the vote if the progressives won't get on board. They won't get on board unless you combine it to make the full bill. The full bill now has to be cut down in accordance with what Manchin and Sinema want, and even Biden to an extent. And again, if you lose more than, I think it's 4 of the so-called progressives in the House, or if you lose a single Senate vote, it doesn't pass at all. There's no way to even get the reconciliation portion through, and for the full bill, you can't even do that. You're going to need more than a simple majority in the Senate. Manchin and Sinema, of course, it's funny to see leftoid thugs following Sinema around, considering, she is on the left. The idea that she's center-right or so she's like a conservative Democrat. No, come on. And she's a pander. I can see through the personality quirks. Hey, I'm young-ish and I happen to be a lesbian. So if you criticize me, there's something wrong with you. I'm not taken in by that. And of course, Manchin's an old white dude from West Virginia, so that doesn't quite apply. And he owns a yacht, actually. I think he yachts around the muddy waters of West Virginia. Yeah, anybody want a Charleston chew? Anyway, I'm getting off track here. First and foremost, let me just say, if you're watching this video on YouTube, keep in mind there will be a pinned comment down below with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. I make multiple videos a day, 2 videos a day, that are only on those platforms. They're not on YouTube, so you're only getting at most half a clank if you are not following me on these other sites. So make sure to do that. Now, I got to take umbrage with one thing here, which is that Joe Biden, he's aware of the fact that the budget that he's proposing, the infrastructure bill, well, number one, it's not really mostly infrastructure, but that's a totally different story we can also get into separately. It's going to cost trillions of dollars. When he says it won't cost anything, he's doing the weasel word thing where you're like, well, but we can offset the total cost because it also contains new taxes, essentially. Now, the number of new taxes in that bill is not going to get anywhere near $3.5 trillion over the next 10 years. Sorry, but the money simply is not there. That would be you would have to massively increase taxes in order to make up that actual total. The problem is that if you take that from businesses, and part of it is a massive increase in the business tax rate, businesses will be fine. They'll either leave the United States, causing spiraling unemployment. I wouldn't be surprised at that. I know I would move out. If they were trying to raise my business tax rate to 45%, I would sell. I'd sell my business entirely, and it'd be derelict. Or I'd close down. I'd immediately file bankruptcy, maybe, or I'd go to Asia. I'd go to Vietnam, or I'd rather go to Sweden. A nice literate workforce, hardworking and stuff. You get to see seals and shit like that, and you don't have to worry about a 45% business tax rate. It would be almost regressive in nature, though, because the increased cost of goods, because you've just massively put a new burden on businesses, will trickle down. This is leftoid trickle down in action to the poor. It means that the poor and the rich person, by the way, treated the same. The candy bar still costs twice as much. It's just that the rich person doesn't care. The rich person is rich. They can buy the whole candy bar factory. They can buy a whole truckload of Hershey bars. The poor person now, it's paying $2.50 instead of whatever it is now for a Hershey bar, is the one that goes without the Hershey bar. This, by the way, then depresses spending, at least to a degree, and harms businesses further, causing potentially a reset-style economy. That's just one aspect. Think of it. This is just one small portion of this huge omnibus double bill. It's supposedly about infrastructure. And remember, initially they were dovetailing it with COVID. Well, infrastructure this, the economy that, recovery this. Do they even mention it anymore? Not really. It's morphed into a leftoid feeding frenzy with universal pre-K and universal community college and better healthcare facilities and all of these things, which sound really great on paper until you look at the way they're going to be paid for and the economic situation from which you want to pay for it. The fact is, right now would be a better time to impose austerity on the government. Right now would be the time to do what Reagan did in his first term, freeze new spending and then let the government begin to decrease as a proportion of GDP. When Biden comes out and rambles about the debt ceiling, my goodness, we shouldn't be borrowing anything. We should be reducing our spending. Now I know supposedly this magically leads to a situation in which businesses are devastated and the poor are out on the streets and everyone starves. That's not actually what happens, though. That's what happens when leftoids build a bubble by doing exactly what's being done here. This leads to recession conditions. We're already on the brink of it now. We've got a stagflationary economy, and you're talking about spending $3.5 trillion more. Now, I believe that the bill, at least in that utmost form, is never going to pass. Manchin has made it fairly clear, and he hasn't, by the way, gone back on his intent. Sinema and a few others as well, and none of which want to end the filibuster, so again, only part of this bill can even be passed with a simple majority, which would require Kamala Harris, and it would be basically a unilateral dictatorial style decision, which would harm the Democrats, which I think is good. It's good if they get scooted out in the midterms massively, but what happens is that now they've got to pick through the weeds, and there's a problem. Depending on who you ask, they either want to axe portions of the infrastructure bill, again to slim it down to some indeterminate amount. I don't think it should pass at all, but 1.5 trillion is less damaging than 3.5. It's still, by the way, when you get to the point where it's only 1.5 trillion, we made it a lot cheaper, don't you think again that the government should be kind of fucking strangulated a little bit more? Maybe we should tighten that leash a bit, put it in a smaller box, make it less spoiled, feed it less money. Anyway, what happens is they can't decide whether to axe entire portions or simply give a trim to different things that are there. The problem is that you've got dozens of people in the House and the Senate that have put forth a bunch of different red lines forward on specifically popular within their state or their district parts of this that they're not willing to even trim. So you've got some of them that say, no, if it doesn't extend the child tax credits, I'm off. I won't vote for the bill. And some cases they're vowing to their voters this. I realize that a lot of times they forget their vows, but all you need is basically one or two people at this point to actually have principles. Whether they're leftoid or rightoid principles doesn't even matter. And the bill falls through. It won't neither portion of it can pass. Some of the progressives are saying that they won't vote for it, and this is why Pelosi shelved it, because it would have failed in the House, which the Democrats actually have a slight majority in, as opposed to the Senate where it's 50-50. Pelosi wouldn't even pull forth the current package for a vote because the progressives have refused to vote for it, by and large, if it doesn't use the reconciliation process plus combine the rest of the infrastructure bill, so the whole 3.5 trillion or whatever the eventual amount is. You then have people in the Senate that want to uncouple them and simply advance the much smaller spending bill. And they're like, hey, all of this other stuff basically should be considered separately. You've got Green New Deal energy projects and all of this other pork barrel. It's funny. I love it when members of the legislature are effectively giving kickbacks to their voters at federal taxpayer expense. And yet they call it activism or they call it a deal instead of calling it the more traditional pork barrel politics. That's basically, hey, I got elected. I'm going to give you some free shit with other people paying for it. Please re-elect me. That's what the left is doing with this bill. It's essentially an attempt to bribe people. And when it's defeated, or if it's trimmed down, they get to blame other people. Right now, though, it's friendly fire because who are they blaming? Sinema and Manchin and a few people in the House. They're not blaming the Republicans. The only one there is Turtle Man, who deserves to be blamed because, he's basically everything wrong with the GOP, and nobody cares about him. His approval, by the way, I think is lower than Pelosi's at this point. So keeping that in mind, they're attacking mainly two of their own fellow Democrats, threatening to primary him and stuff. Yes, it's really going to get Joe Manchin on board with a $3.5 trillion spending bill if you just call him a traitor or a Nazi more. That's going to it's going to change his mind. I'm glad that this is dead in the water. I hope it is trimmed as much as possible or done away with, but here's the thing. We don't know what would be trimmed. So would the IRS expansion go away? I think it should. I think the IRS should be shrunk, if anything. But Biden wants to massively expand it in order to punish his political adversaries. Will Manchin or Sinema or someone else demand that be cut from it in order to save a huge amount of money? Because you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, so that's a fairly beefy portion. Are you going to axe the section that tries to corporatize crypto on behalf of big banks and big tech firms, which is what it is? It's basically a kickback to Biden's donors. What about the fact that by letting the Trump tax cuts lapse, by axing those, you actually give a significant tax break to the billionaire class in the form of the restoration of the limitless SALT deduction? Is that going to be axed? Because, if you want to get all this money from the multi-billionaires, why don't you axe that? Keep it capped so that, the blue state billionaire class, because they all live in New York and New Jersey and California and shit, they have to pay more. They have to pay their fair share, right? Right, Bernie Sanders? Right, AOC? Oh, that's right. That's not what this is actually about. They're not going to get a penny from these people. Businesses will offshore. Billionaires will use loopholes because not being closed. I think they're closing some loopholes for the lower income brackets, though. This is a tax on the middle class, and then giving some shit to the super poor, which will be shitty anyway because it's centralized and the government's not good with the actual infrastructure side of things, and it won't help anyone, except for the billionaires that Biden supposedly wants to go after because they're being unfair and unkind. All these people that donated record billions of dollars to my election campaign, they're all bad people. Michael Bloomberg, who dumped $100 million into Florida and still, got cocksmacked, he needs to pay his fair share. Yeah, he's going to get it from his donor buddies. Elizabeth Warren's wine vineyard friends. That's about all. Peace out.